Welcome, folks. I am Jabby Kawai, joined by Char Kirk.
What's up?
We're about to dive into Moon Knight, Episode 4, breakdown Easter eggs and details you missed by New Rockstars. Thank you, New Rockstars, for allowing us to react to this. Very, very much appreciate it. Y'all, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, please. Bell icon, all notifications, and pretty please vote this up to let YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching. While you're subscribing and upvoting, subscribe to New Rockstars. There's a link in the description below. You can click on that link, give the original video an upvote, and subscribe to them from there. Okie dokie, here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Moon Knight Episode 4, which, like Mark and Steven, made me scream, "Holy hippopotamus!" Turns out I wasn't that delusional for thinking some of this could be all in Steven's mind, or could I still be delusional? Probably still a bit delusional. I mean, who knows what's going on? So I'm gonna break down this episode shot by shot for the interesting details you might have missed to best explain one of the wildest twists we've ever seen in the MCU. And remember to support New Rockstars by checking out our Moon Knight-inspired Tomb of the Moon God shirt. Limited supply, running out fast. Get it over at newrockstarsmerch.com, and when you get the shirt, you're gonna unlock the added option to write in a custom shout out that will appear at the bottom of our Midnight After shows. And thanks to KiwiCo for sponsoring today's video. More about them later. So we begin this episode upside down as the avatar for Osiris places Khonshu's Ushabti in a cubbyhole among several others. Our view only finally orients, righting itself on this close-up of Khonshu, making him our compass, our true north for what is real this whole episode, because without him this hour, Mark, Steven, all of us are lost. I like how Osiris' avatar takes this uncertain beat after placing the Ushabti, since they have clearly stonified a ton of deities, not a healthy sign.
Yeah.
Like a warden wondering, everyone is now in prison. Are the laws too strict? No, it's everyone else who's wrong. Also, Osiris may be wondering if he could be the next one. Among these figurines are a whole bunch of them, one with curved horns, another shorter one to the far left. A lot of these look like the larger statues among the chamber last episode towering over them. I wonder if the 5 members of the Ennead may have Ushabti'd their ranking elders like Atum and Shu. That could explain why 4 of the 9 Ennead members are missing. I also think that Taweret may be among these figurines, and I'll explain what that means for the final scene. Especially because in the closing credits of every episode, on the back right, a Taweret Ushabti appears alongside these others, which fill in the cubby holes we see in the opening shot. That tells us that Taweret must be banished, which is a very important key to how we interpret the final scene. Throughout this opening scene, we hear several voices chanting.
Oh, I thought that's just music.
It sounds like.
As if these trapped gods and the statues are all haunting Osiris, demanding to be freed. Then out in the desert, a scarab crawls up a mound and flies off. Now the scarab was of course the compass that was used to find Amit's Ushabti. And now even this scarab compass is like, peace out, you mortals suck. Now by the way, the hieroglyphics on that scarab were translated to the phrase, "O Khepri, amid his boats, primeval one, whose corporeality is infinity, may you rescue Osiris, Amenhotep, true of voice." Khepri being the sun deity represented by the scarab, which Egyptians associated with the way it rolled its dung across the sand with the way Khepri rolled the sun across the sky. Now remember last episode, Steven joined Khonshu in casting that illusion to make the heavens look like they did 2,000 years prior. And when that happened, the little detail I liked, Steven's Mr. Knight mask wilted away, matching Khonshu's dissipation. Just a cool way of showing how Steven was losing a part of himself as well, no longer having the armor and the healing properties that really would have come in handy when Arthur shot him twice in the chest. But a detail that I loved here, whereas past episodes, the crescent moon always shined to reflect Khonshu being at his most powerful, now notice how the moon is in its waxing gibbous phase, the exact opposite of the waning crescent in the lunar cycle, which is a cool way of showing Khonshu's inverted, totally weakened state now. Actually, by the way, in the credits of every episode of the season, on the written by title card, it reflects the way the phases of the moon shift episode after episode from waxing crescent to the first quarter to now in this episode, gibbous. Layla pulls a Jurassic Park Dr. Alan Grant and lights a flare to direct Harrow's men away from the passed out Steven, and then insanely throws another lit flare into their box of shells to set them all off like fireworks. Even though in the shot from behind her, she is clearly totally exposed to all of those projectiles, as is Steven. Folks, the Indiana Jones antics go way over the top this episode, and I truly think it is by design to suggest Mark could be pulling all this from his Tomb Buster movie. Actually, as they drive into the desert the next morning, these locations were the same parts of Jordan where they shot Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
No way!
Meanwhile,
oh my gosh.
Look in the show and the way she plays Layla.
Well, I would shoot so much in Jordan though for this type of stuff, I think.
Right. I was watching the beginning of their New Rockstars' reaction to episode 4, and they actually started out with the lead-in of the TV show Into the Crazy House. MT and Eric Voss were freaking out at the TV show reenactment, which is just like Indiana Jones, and like the music cues and everything like that. They're like, oh my God, it's so close. They were losing their shit completely. Like they start out with the most epic reaction of the show, of the episode, which is the last 5 minutes of the show. It's actually quite fun to watch if you guys haven't seen it.
Definitely evokes Rachel Weisz from the Mummy movies. I really think these cinematic parallels are all by design. Layla and Steven agree to keep Mark out of it.
We are not. It's just you and me and the open road.
I'm gonna go on foot from here.
The camera lingers on these 3 bullet holes in the windshield, which you could see as representative of the 3 altars we think make up Mark's mind. The way that the holes can be in there without breaking or shattering the whole thing, because Mark is not broken. Those 3 altars we assume are Mark, Steven, and Jake Lockley. As of this episode, we have not yet met Jake. They pass a goat who stares them down, in addition to the Christian associations between goats and evil. There was that moment with Steven and Harrow in episode 2.
Oh, yes.
Where there is a goat, there is a hero. Now, when Steven initially wants to make a move on Layla, Mark punches his own face in the jaw.
Oh, shit.
Another Fight Club reference, Tyler Durden does essentially the same thing.
That's right.
And then after going back and forth with Layla, Steven finally makes his move.
The intention is a little different between the 2 face punches.
Before I belay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steven totally misinterpreted it down to mean not belay, but you know, another kind of down, a sex kind. Steven geeks out at the statues down there.
They just like stand and guard for centuries.
Right? No, I can't even. So if they just sprang to life right now and asked me a riddle for passage, I'd be thrilled. I shit myself, but I'd be thrilled.
Yes, he's referring to the riddle of the Sphinx. The Sphinx being the creature with the haunches of a lion, the wings of a bird. It's best known from Greek mythology, where it has the head of a woman, but in Egyptian mythology, it has the head of a man. To the Greeks, it guards the city of Thebes.
Didn't just have the head of a woman, it had other things of a woman too.
One voice, yet becomes 4-footed, and then 2-footed, and then 3-footed. And Oedipus answered, correctly, man, who crawls on all 4s as a baby, walks on 2 feet as an adult, and uses a walking stick in old age. 3 beings in 1 also parallels Mark and his altars, each of whom have a different stride, yet speak in one voice. And one cannot help but draw a connection to the caned figure of Arthur Harrow, who ends this episode using his walking stick. This is also, of course, a big clue for the reveal of Alexander the Great. For the way Egyptian iconography and obelisks and sphinxes made their way into Greece was because of Alexander's occupation of Egypt and his obsession with Egypt. In the sand, Layla traces the Arabic letters, going from right to left, because that's how Arabic works, Ain and Elif, her father's initials, as we saw her full name on her passport last episode, Layla Abdallah El Faouli. Abdallah meaning servant of God, which is a bit ironic because Mark is trying to keep her from being a servant to the god Khonshu. While exploring the tunnels, Layla says,
It's a maze.
It's amazing.
No, like there are 6 paths.
Yeah, 6.
Of course, since this episode ends by suggesting much of this could have been all in Mark's mind, it's worth noting that the concept of a maze has often been considered a symbol of the subconscious mind, back to Greek mythology, the labyrinth, and then manifesting in contemporary media like Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, Westworld, and the amazing series Severance. Watch that show, it's so good. This maze represents Mark's mind, perhaps the 6 paths representing as many as 6 altars stored inside. But Steven traces out the structure to show how this is modeled on the Eye of Horus and its 6 parts, citing this symbol that some historians interpret to represent the 6 senses of thought, sight, hearing, smell, and taste. According to mythology, Horus's right eye was the sun, and the left eye, the moon. And this is his left eye here. So the moon is always present in this show. But in the mythology, there was a fight between Horus and his brother Set, and Set tore out the eye, and the eye is later healed and restored, either by Tot or by Hathor.
I was watching a video about that actually, and so the idea is that this battle happens in the sky every night.
Yeah.
And that's why like every time you see the moon again, it's because the battle's happening with the Eye of... I got a cursory understanding from this YouTube video I watched that was trying to deep dive into Khonshu and Khonshu. Like, the name that is used in the Marvel TV show is actually a slight mispronunciation of the word.
Okay.
Like, they say Khonshu.
Yeah.
Right, but it's supposed to be Khonshu, apparently. That's just a little bit,
okay, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, all this mythology stuff is amazing because it's just so fascinating how ancient cultures use stories to explain things that happen in the natural world, right? So this battle between Set and Horus, it makes sense. It tells a story. These 2 gods are fighting, and that's why we have daytime and nighttime, because sometimes one is out and one's not.
Right. Well, those are supposed to be the eyes.
Right.
Apparently, Khonshu was like this character that has not actually been deeply, deeply explored in Egyptian mythology.
I hadn't really heard of him, but I'm only really familiar with the super famous ones.
He actually came late in the mythology or something like that is what I understand. Now feel free to correct the shit out of me in the comments if you know more than I do. This is just something I got from a YouTube video. So.
Whom we met last episode, which is why the symbol now represents healing and protection. I just like how when Stephen clears the sand to trace this, his flashlight now reflects off of the metallic surface beneath to form the Eye of Horus on the ceiling above them.
That is
As
cool.
if either Horus or Hathor could be watching over their deeds here, or this represents the moon that Khonshu is watching all of this. Then they come across this mummification chamber used by these undead priests who are buried alongside the pharaoh. On the upper level, Mark finds some stuff that he says was used in regeneration rituals, which all just leads to this gore fest in the middle of the episode where the priest extracts organs from Harrow's man and tries to do it to Mark and Layla. Who knows why he's doing this? Layla comes across this gaping pit, reminding us of the chasm that Indiana Jones has to make the leap
that's right.
across in the Last Crusade.
I was thinking about that.
A bit of a leap of faith in the scene.
I was thinking, like, did she just take a leap?
Despite the bad stuff he was involved with. She has to fend off this priest monster by ripping off his arm and then shoving a flare in his face. She loves her flares.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you remember Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? What happens in that scene?
Not clearly.
So Indiana Jones, he has this book that's helping him. Like, I think his dad wrote the book, if I recall correctly, that sort of is helping him to guide him on this journey to get to the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And he's faced with this chasm between him and the Holy Grail. He doesn't know how to get across. In the book, it just says, take a leap of faith. The guy, the little drawing, just steps out onto the air. And it's one of the neatest scenes as a kid to watch, where he takes a step out, and what happens is it's almost like an optical illusion. This bridge that's in front of him, it's just made to look like part of the chasm, but there's actually a bridge there. And so then Indiana Jones gets across, he grabs a handful of sand and throws it across so you can see the layout of the bridge over the chasm.
40 pieces of flare on this one. Now, this zombie priest makes a clicking sound, which comes off pretty creepy, but this is actually the result of his tongue being removed from the embalming process. Also, assuming his eyes were removed in that process as well, the clicking allows him to echolocate his targets around the tomb, the way bats use similar clicking sounds.
I'm a little bit confused as to how that creature is able to make any sounds at all if the tongue was taken out.
Yeah, that is a little bit strange.
You need the tongue in order to make that clicking sound off the roof of your mouth, don't you?
Yeah. That is strange. I thought he was going to say something about them being like clickers in The Last of Us or something.
Yeah, that probably would have been too obvious.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Interesting.
It's not just bats either. It's dolphins as well.
And when his hand reaches out of the wall at Layla, it's very similar to the frame of the corpse hand reaching in through the subway door in the comics when Mark's mental hospital reality warps around him. Meanwhile, Stephen finds some Macedonian language on the foot of the tomb. Actually, if you translate the back half of those letters, they really translate to Alexander, confirming this huge discovery for Stephen.
I think we're looking at the long-lost tomb of Alexander the Great.
Whoa! So, Alexander the Great, you should know this guy. He was the one who, by the age of 30, led the Greeks to rule over one of the largest empires in human history, from Europe to India. Alexander was a lover of Egyptian history who also bore the title of Pharaoh. He founded the city of Alexandria, where many believe after his death in Babylon in 323 BC, he could now be buried somewhere in the city of Alexandria. But his tomb has never been pinpointed and verified. So, unless this is all a fantasy, and that might actually be the case, the implication here is that Alexander the Great, in the history of the MCU, was the final avatar of Amit, and that Alexander's military feats might have been enabled by Amit's power, and maybe even the cult-like love that Alexander inspired could have been the same kind of cult following that Arthur Harrow now enjoys. Famously, the saying goes that Alexander wept because there were no worlds left to conquer. Therefore, Alexander might have been that past avatar who betrayed Amit. He could have been the one who sold her out to the gods, and her detachment from him is what led to his death in Babylon. After which point the Ennead said, Amit, you have helped out humanity way too much. No one should have conquered that much turf. You a statue. And then had someone stuff that statue in his mouth. You wanted her to be her voice? Eat her! Eat her! I like how on Alexander's chest is a scarab necklace with its wings open, evoking Harrow's scarab compass that he uses to find her, X marking the spot for Amit's Ushapti, which is buried deep in Alexander's gullet.
Reminds me of what's-her-name's necklace, though.
That he's
a little bit.
Actually been the one he famously used to cut the Gordian knot. But Harrow reveals to Layla that Mark was among the mercenaries who killed her father, and she confronts him.
Talking to you. I'm talking to you, Mark!
Yeah, Stephen immediately nopes out of this awkward marriage drama. And I just like how the frame breaks the rule of 180 to show this transition, awkwardly cutting so that Oscar Isaac now switches to the right side of the frame. And Mark affirms that.
For those of you that don't know the 180 rule, basically there's this like invisible line, right? So like if Achara and I are doing a scene with each other, and the camera angles when we're talking to each other is like the camera on this side, camera on this side. And so in this frame over here, Achara's on the right, Jabby's on the left. On this one, Jabby's on the left, Achara's on the right. Sorry, it's like weird in my head. But you would never want to cross this 180-degree rule. You want to stay on this side of the line, because so if you have the camera here, you wouldn't want to put the reverse angle over here, or vice versa. If a char's camera's over here, you wouldn't want to put my camera over here, because then it disorients the audience, and you're putting us on the same side in terms of when you're reversing cuts.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? Am I speaking it slow enough?
Yeah, I think I understand. It's like you want to give the illusion that you're always on the same side of the frame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whatever camera angle we're using, you're on the same side, I'm on the same side.
Yeah,
You're
when they cut it together.
Yeah, you're always on the left and I'm always on the right, and then this side, same thing. But if we swap sides of your shoulder, then we're breaking the 180 rule.
Yeah.
And so they deliberately did that here to let us know that he's switching people. It's very, very interesting.
That's genius.
Yeah.
That's such a cool little detail.
Yeah, like that. Because Eric Voss just flippantly went past that 180 thing. I'm like, that's a whole thing that needs to be explained that most people don't know about.
While he did not kill Layla's dad, he was still there.
My partner got greedy and he executed everyone on the big side.
Shot me too. I was supposed to die that night.
I'm assuming this partner was Frenchie DeCamp, whose name appeared on Mark's flip phone. Promo footage has shown the moment Mark first got possessed by Khonshu. I assume next episode or episode 6 will show us what this backstory was. Harrow and his men arrive.
The rest is silence.
Yes, another Shakespeare reference. After Macbeth's Something Wicked in episode 1 and the Romeo and Juliet Verona Light of episode 2, the rest is silence are the final words spoken by Hamlet in Hamlet after his long, drawn-out death from being cut with a poisoned sword in his duel with Laertes. After that cut, Hamlet actually goes on and on for nearly 100 lines. So Shakespeare ends his life with those words in almost a self-satirical tone, like the kid finally shutting up after going back and forth on death for 5 acts. When you think about it, the line is actually a pretty good pun. The rest is silence. But also, the rest is silence. And in this, we can draw a comparison with Mark, whom much speculation has wondered might already be dead. And this whole series is his passage through the field of reeds.
And did it suck for you? Getting rejected from the field of reeds?
Well, that don't make sense, because I'm not dead, am I?
Stevie.
Am I?
And Harrow is now preparing to lay the final nail in the coffin. Harrow does this by shooting Mark twice in the chest, and Mark slowly falls backward, matching the fall last episode when he blacked out. Similarly, Mark is out of control, not sure what form he's gonna wake up in, because he passes out from overhead in just inches of water, but when we cut to him from below, we are now several meters deeper than him in that water as he descends into this sunken place, where now you'll notice the bullet holes are gone from his chest, showing how Mark has sunken from his passage of the field of reeds, now more like that sunken boat and poor sarcophagus in the tank, as we saw Mark reflected submerged in that tank in episode 2. And now we find ourselves in this low-budget jungle set of Tomb Buster, a title clearly an Indiana Jones ripoff, even its name a nod to the Tomb Raider franchise. But this scene is totally similar to the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Indy and Doc Ock found the remains of the previous adventurer. Even the music sting is almost note for note John Williams' Indiana Jones theme.
Maybe so. It's not pluck.
So the implication of this is that Mark might have pulled the name and the heroic expertise of Stephen Grant from this movie, almost like someone in our world manifesting an altar named Dr. Jones, a Princeton archaeologist and adventurer. But notice how instead of the Egyptian moon god, they explore the Aztec moon deity of Coyoxauhqui, who is depicted here with multiple faces, like the split bust of Mark that we have been seeing in the closing credits imagery. It's just interesting that while Ethan Hawke's analyst character later compares himself to the villain of this movie, this Dr. Stephen Grant really does physically resemble Arthur Harrow. His hair, his glasses, his usage of the compass. Actually, that villain in the movie is never named. For all we know, this Indiana Jones figure might end up being revealed to be the villain of that movie, the kid who looks up to him, the hero. Just like as we watch Marc Spector and Stephen Grant and Arthur Harrow on this show, we don't really know who the villains and the heroes are, because Khonshu is kind of a dick. This whole twist is awesome. Several characters from the cast reappear, all of them now in this facility. Street performer Crawley is now calling bingo numbers, pulling them from his hat, which he holds out the same way his hat was always laid out in front of him in the park. The bald man fidgets with a Rubik's Cube, almost completing the white side as we saw in Steven's flat. I'm pretty sure that's the tour guide Dylan, Steven's date, sitting at the table behind the bald guy. The orderlies are Bobby, aka Kennedy, the fake detective, while the other pushing us from Mark's point of view here in the wheelchair is Billy, aka Fitzgerald. Their names were a major clue of this reveal because in the comics, Billy and Bobby are the names of orderlies who work in Mark's mental hospital. Also in the comics, Crawley is revealed to be another resident at the hospital at some point, the same way he is here. The red, yellow, and blue bowls of Jell-O are just like the brightly colored powder in all the bowls that Steven saw in the mummification room. Donna is another patient, clutching one of the plush scarabs that they sell in the museum gift shop. Throughout this, we hear the ticking of a clock, which we pass right after we see Donna, but it looks like it reads 11:25, but the hour hand ends in the shape of a crescent moon. But despite the ticking sound, the second hand of that clock is not moving. There's a cupcake cart, just like the cupcake van that Steven hijacked in episode 1. She sketches a hummingbird with Khonshu's skull, evoking both Khonshu, of course, but also the hummingbird we saw in the commune's nature footage. On the dry erase board are pinned some postcards like the one Steven thinks he receives from his mum. Here, it is Layla who does it, so maybe the mum he thought he was connecting with was actually Layla. There's a goldfish, like Gus, on a stack of books, just like Gus's tank, and Steven's flat that is cluttered with books. Layla appears chewing on a Turkish delight, just like the ones that the Forger shared with her in episode 3.
That's a marshmallow.
Sweet snacks in this facility. Notice how she has a little bandage on her pinky finger with a red drawing of a scarab.
Oh my God.
Major clue pointing to the possibility that Layla Abdallah El Faouli could be an adaptation of Abdul Faoul, aka the Scarlet Scarab, an Egyptian warrior who led the Sons of the Scarab who fought against the invaders, Cap, Human Torch, Namor, Bucky, Spitfire, and Union Jack. As other titles have done, retconning Flag Smasher as Carly Morgenthau and Laura Barton as Mockingbird, Layla could be reframed as the successor of a lineage of Egyptian protectors. A man behind them gardens, like the gardeners at Harrow's commune. Layla says he won at bingo, holding up his card that shows the following numbers dabbed: B83, I23, N86, G65, G35, O67, and O55. And throughout this, we heard Crawley call out the numbers B22, G15, T16, O40 something, O73, and N39. Folks, if you've ever played bingo, these numbers make no sense. The B numbers go 1 through 15, I is 16 through 30, N is 31 through 45, G is 46 through 60, and O is 61 through 75. Most of these letters and numbers would not exist in bingo. Also, Crawley clearly said T16, as in Tango 16, and there is no T in bingo. In high school Spanish class, I played a Spanish version of bingo called Tango, where you say, yo, Tango, I have it. Bingo! Then a medicated Mark falls out of his wheelchair, but the harness on his ankle causes him to fall on the exact same side of his face that he fell in episode 1 when he landed in the Alps.
Right.
In this room.
When he left out of bed. I love how those two moments set up this reveal here. In his hand is this hooded and caped Moon Knight action figure, which if Moon Knight ain't a really known hero in the MCU at this point, would there be an action figure of him? Also, another weird thing, what was he dabbing his bingo card with? I didn't see a dabber in his hand. Then onto Harrow's office. Mark sees his painting of the exact landscape of the Alps where Steven found himself in episode 1. But Harrow, now the analyst of this facility, says,
we don't live in a material world. We live in a psychic world.
I mean, Harrow's office even has a bizarre design. Big columns, tall ceilings, brick surfaces and arches. There's these headed vases, just like the ones that the priest stored the organs inside of in the tomb.
See, all the details he's pointing out right now is exactly why I'm led to believe that this is the simulation. This is the fake part. The whole thing with the end of that episode is like, all these things is just a dream.
Did they really do that to us?
Like he was extracting all these details from his environment, almost like Dorothy in Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you were there and you were there and you were there. But like, it seems to be actually the inverse, where he's caught inside of some kind of a trap. That's what it seems like. I mean, he's literally next to himself in the thing, you know, Mark and Steve. So
well, that's kind of what I was saying. Like, it feels like Arthur Harrow is maybe building this, or maybe even Amit is, to kind of get into his head and extract some information or something from him. And the only way to do that is to trick him to kind of come at it sideways instead of directly.
One has the falcon head of Ra, as well as the hippo head of Taweret, and its human head that I think matches the sarcophagus of Alexander the Great. Harrow has a cane that Mark assumes that he must have mapped the Amit staff over, and of course sandals, just like the ones he fills with glass. And notice how Mark sees those sandals through the reflection of a mirror. A housefly lands on Mark's hand, maybe a reflection of his rotting corpse status back in the tomb. Also reminding us of the final shot of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, when Norman Bates' mother voice said that she wouldn't even hurt a little fly that landed on her. Also on the desk are a bunch of sharp things that should not be on a desk of this kind of facility. There's a large curved piece that matches the shape of a crescent moon, as well as a pyramid. And if you look closely at that VHS cover of Tomb Buster, it says, "When deeper in here, Stephen Grant has no fear," which isn't the case in the final shot of the episode, but maybe a clue that Stephen Grant in a place like this is gonna be the more heroic figure. Dr. Harrow says,
I can't help you if you don't help yourself.
Which is what Harrow said after shooting Stephen in that tomb.
I can't save anyone who won't save themselves.
By the door is another statue, the crocodile head of Amit. And as Harrow steps up to Mark at the door, he's just framed with this close-up of his hand on the cane, the way he's been framed in several other shots, like the opening scene of the series. As Mark flees, the hallways just warp, the carts are rolling on their own, the hanging lights just swing back and forth, looking a lot like the swinging scales of Amit's justice. We've also been seeing this hallway in the closing credits imagery, flickering from the storage unit all the way into this one. And if you remember back in episode 2, the way Stephen ran down that hallway is the same way Mark runs down this one. Both of these forming a maze in his mind. In one room, he finds this sarcophagus.
Stephen? Mark? Stephen! Mark!
This is the first time that the two alters have actually touched physically, suggesting that they are in the same sunken place inside of his mind. They actually had Oscar Isaac's brother, Michael Hernandez, stand in for him during these scenes. The smooth camera work makes it look like we never cut from Oscar Isaac at the door to Oscar Isaac coming out of the sarcophagus, but you can see there is a hidden cut on the whip pan. I also like here how Mark is dressed in light garb, whereas Steven is dressed in darker clothes, which not only helps us distinguish the two, but also frames which one of these two alters is closer to Khonshu.
Is it just me or his brother looks like twice his size?
He's a little bigger, yeah.
Yeah, like...
He's husky, you know?
I understood with Paul Walker and his brothers because they have similar frames. Their bodies, they look similarly shaped, but like this seems like a very odd pairing, him and his brother. I mean, other than the emotional factor.
Well, yeah, or maybe that's not a recent photo. Maybe he's, dropped a few pounds. And maybe that's not as important because they're just going to put Oscar Isaac in there on both sides. So
no, you're right. It's been a pandemic.
Mark notices another mysterious sarcophagus that shakes in another room that they don't open. I am assuming that this is going to be the mystery third altar, maybe Jake Lockley, whoever it was who stabbed those men on the roof last episode. And then we end on this awesome moment. This is Taweret, the Egyptian deity of childbirth and fertility, who takes on the appearance of a hippopotamus, but with otherwise human features, the kind of features Disney Plus definitely had to cover with a more modest wardrobe. I just love the hippopotamus animation details that they added, like the way her ears wiggle when she says hi, and the way her nostrils flare. She is voiced by actress Antonia Salid, confirmed at the red carpet premiere last month, and she's credited for this episode as well as episodes 5 and 6. So we're gonna be spending a lot of time with her. So what is going on? Well, the Moon Knight comics, especially the Jeff Lemire and Greg Smallwood run that seems most influential on this series, constantly shift back and forth from Mark's supernatural experiences to a clinical setting, repeatedly making the reader second guess what could be real and what could be a delusion. This state of uncertainty is exactly what Moon Knight is supposed to feel like. And there's enough surreality and falseness in both Mark and Steven's experiences in the outside world and their experiences in the hospital to doubt the legitimacy of either reality. Even before Taweret walks in, no mental hospital looks like this or has cupcake cards. Meanwhile, all the Indiana Jones stuff this episode was also super silly and fictitious. So is anything on this show real? Well, I see 3 explanations. First explanation, the past episodes with Steven and Mark in the outside world was all a fantasy constructed by a patient in a mental hospital, a patient who still suffers from delusions while in this hospital. Kind of like how all of St. Elsewhere was in the mind of autistic child Tommy Westfall. The patient who dreamt all this up might be neither Mark nor Steven, who, if you think about it, are both pretty heightened realities, but rather a more grounded figure, the guy in the other sarcophagus.
That reminds me of a horror movie with John Cusack. I forgot what it was called, and I think the villain from Daredevil is the guy whose mind that they're inside of.
Vincent D'Onofrio?
Yeah, him. I think it was him. Someone will point out in the comments, I'm sure, but basically it was a horror movie where these people were sort of trapped at a hotel or something like that, and then they realized that there was a limitation to the space that they were able to get to, and then they all realized that they were inside of somebody's mind at a certain point, that they were just alter egos of the same individual. And so, yeah, I forgot the name of the movie, but that
very interesting.
Yeah, and so the person whose mind they were inside of was really nothing like any of them because he could take on multiple personalities.
You know what I was thinking as well with this one. You remember which episode was it? The second episode when he basically gets let go from his job. The HR guy was like, "Oh, here's this place that you could go to," and hands him this brochure, and it looks really nice and fancy. And so I was wondering if maybe he had actually ended up there.
Oh yeah, that's possible too.
I'm not sure.
The movie I was thinking of is called Identity, and the one-liner from IMDb is, stranded at a desolate Nevada motel during a nasty rainstorm, 10 strangers become acquainted with each other when they realize they're being killed off one by one.
Ooh.
And so, Vincent, is it Vincent?
I think I said his name wrong, D'Onofrio.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong guy. It might be this guy, Pruitt, Taylor, Vince. Anyway.
Gotcha.
In any case, the guy whose mind they're inside of, I guess, is killing them off one by one inside of his own head. It's just a weird movie.
Wow,
and
okay.
Alfred Molina's in that movie too. Doc Ock. Anyway.
Doc Ock, yeah.
Not important.
Maybe Jake. Explanation 2. Everything we have seen happen pre-hospital is real, but now, after he got shot, Mark slipped into a kind of limbo state deep in his subconscious
That's what I'm thinking.
takes the form of a mental
That's
hospital
like the most
filled with people
obvious
and images
one.
from his life. Like Dorothy Gale after she hit her head and went to Oz, or like Tony Soprano when he had that hallucination after he got shot. But explanation 3. Marc Spector has already been in the process of dying. A long drawn out process like our boy Hamlet. And And this
Jacob's
whole time,
ladder?
he has been passing through the field of reeds. The brooms were the reeds, folks. All 4 of these episodes, a purgatorial judgment process for a man with DID to reach peace with his altars before the rest is silence. I mean, I don't know, but this third explanation might help us understand what this hospital now is, why it is filled with sarcophagi and Taweret. Now, yes, the hindquarters of Amit are that of a hippopotamus. Maybe they're gonna draw a parallel with Amit being 3 in 1, the way Mark is. And here, Amit's altars are depicted as separate people. But again, Taweret is her own deity, the goddess of fertility. I don't see how fertility applies much to what Steven and Mark are going through.
That's what I was
There was
thinking.
a connection in the past, if you remember episode 1, when Steven handled some of those plush Tawerets while doing inventory in the museum.
Bring those hippos up here, will you?
Yeah, sure. Taweret. The hippo. Goddess Taweret.
Which is why I think there could be more to the opening images of this episode. The wall filled with the Ushaptis. Dozens and dozens of gods trapped somewhere. There was that one interesting line from Dr. Harrow where he quoted the villain of Tombbuster.
No tree can ascend to the light of heaven if it doesn't descend to the depths of hell.
Heaven and hell, above and below. Khonshu accused the members of the Ennead for hiding in the Overvoid. Now, I think we could be in the MCU's underworld, a realm that may end up going by many names in the MCU, maybe even has already been introduced in the form of the ancestral plane. This is a subjectively psychic dimension where reality manifests itself in the eyes of the beholder. To a DID patient, a mental hospital with Egyptian flair. Because trapped in him with this realm of Mark and his altars and projections of people in his life are the other Egyptian gods that the Ennead banished to the underworld. Amit, Khonshu, and this sexy-ass Taweret. No tree can ascend to the heavens without descending to the depths of hell is also a paraphrase of a quote from famous philosopher and psychoanalyst Carl Jung, who said, quote, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots are in hell." This was Jung's way of saying human enlightenment is impossible unless we recognize our inner demons that collectively haunt us. This being a reflection of this stage in Mark's hero's journey, to descend into hell before he can reach true consciousness. And again, since a stone Ushapti of Taweret appears in the credits of every episode, and presumably also in that wall of cubbyholes with all the other stone Ushaptis who have been exiled somewhere, that right there may be proof that we are now in the Duat, the underworld that all exiled gods are trapped in, and Mark's soul is currently with them. Back in episode 2, when Steven was handed a pamphlet to seek help from a mental health facility, this may all now be how his subconscious, the subconscious of a DID patient, decorates the Egyptian underworld of the Duat. This show's version of the MCU afterlife, the ancestral plane, Valhalla, wherever the hell Thanos went to. In this case, how this hero takes the plunge into the depths of hell and prepares to fight his way back out of it.
Whoa, literally just like mind blown. Wow.
So the last one that he's talking about is basically the plot of Jacob's Ladder. It stars Tim Robbins, and I think if I recall correctly, he's a soldier that got injured really, really badly on a battlefield, and these nurses are trying to repair him. And while he's dying, he goes through this whole journey, and the movie is exploring that. That's the entire film, is him dying and this journey in his mind. It's a horror movie. It's horrific. It's scary.
Right.
He's seeing stuff that is just like absurd and crazy, and I'm like, Jacob's Ladder. Like that number 3 that he laid out here, I'm like, that is actually quite possible that that's what's going on here. Everything he detailed in number 3, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's actually, my initial impression was number 2, the one he spent the least amount of time explaining.
Well, yeah, because I feel like that, like I said, that's probably the most obvious way.
I don't think it's number 1. I think it's either 2 or 3. Him dying and then this whole exploration while he's dying makes a little bit of sense. I think it's a combination of the two, somewhere in the middle. Number 2 is the most likely, and then number 3, like, because he mentioned the whole like purgatory for the gods thing as part of number 3.
Yeah.
But I think that it's quite possible that it's basically number 2 and then he ends up in the purgatory anyway.
Well, the thing is though, the underworld surely is the realm of the gods, because, you know, I mean, depending on which god you are, right? Because certain gods, their role is to rule the underworld. I am sure that that is a place where gods would be quite comfortable either living in or traversing through. So it makes sense to me that there could be gods, or like Eric Voss was saying here, you know, that it's kind of like a holding place for them as well, because they're trapped too.
Well, that's what purgatory is.
Yeah.
There's a comment here at the top of the video. It says, I don't know if anyone else thought of this, but the way the mental asylum was swaying reminded me of the way objects move on a ship on turbulent seas. And there was that trailer that showed a boat swaying on the sands. Is it possible that boat is the embodiment of where Mark Stevens' mental hospital is, a journey through the reeds?
That's interesting.
But like the comment below that, I really hope it wasn't all a dream. I feel like that would undermine the series so much. I agree. My first thought was Inception, because in Inception, like during the dream state when Leonardo DiCaprio was trying to talk to Cillian Murphy inside of, I think, Cillian Murphy's mind.
Yeah.
They were all in this van, and the van was flipping over or something like that. And the lights and everything were swaying. And that's like the first place my mind went.
Yeah, and I think this whole thing that he's saying about, maybe this is his journey through death or to finally go through that. He was just shot. So that is entirely plausible that happened. People say that they see the strangest things when they're dying. Accounts of people who have, flatlined or whatever. Often they talk about, seeing a light or seeing their entire life flash before their eyes. Yeah, it is feasible that in this situation, someone who has DID is kind of, trying to make sense of everything. I do think that it is possible that maybe one of the themes of this show is to kind of get Moon Knight to kind of reconcile with all the different facets of his personality and maybe come to some sort of healing.
Well, just like the tree thing. The tree has to plant its roots in hell before it can reach the heavens or something.
Well, yeah, it's like we all have to come to terms with our shadow in order to, because you can't be a whole person just by focusing on everything that is the light that makes you, that you're proud of, that is like all the best parts of you, because we all have these like nasty shadow aspects of ourselves that we have to accept and love as well.
Some more than others. On that note, you guys, thanks so much for hanging out. Do subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell icon, please, all notifications, and pretty please vote this up to let YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching. That's it for now. I'm Jabby Kaway. This is
Achara Cook.
Peace out.